Okay, here we go with putting together some pieces for this Minnesota flag exploding heart pattern. I counted how many half square triangles I would need with the dark blue and the white for the heart piece. And so now I'm just marking that diagonal line on these 5.5-inch squares. The way that this pattern works, you can actually get 2 half square triangles of each color with just one piece white and one piece dark blue, but you have to sit on the middle, so I'm just marking this with a heat erase pen. Some people say that it comes back if you put your thing in the freezer, but I don't know anybody storing their quilts in the freezer, so I'm going to keep using it. And here we go. This is a video for how I piece together. I do not pin things unless I am trying to match corners. So you will see me line up the pieces of fabric, and then I'm just lining up my 1/4 inch mark with this center line, and I'm going to sew 1/4 inch off the center line on each side. I do backstitch all of my pieces. I know there's a lot of quilters who do not do this, but I do it because, and oh, here I'm pulling down my dual feed foot. I have that on the back of my machine, and that just helps feed the pieces through nice and even, making sure that both top and bottom piece go through at the same pace. So that's one way you can do it, where you can get one piece done with 2 stitches. I'm also going to show you now the chain piecing strategy, where you just go through and you stitch each piece, and then you're going to cut between them and then re-stitch them. But yes, I will backstitch every single one. Some quilters tell you that you don't need to do this, and then they go around and they complain that they have their seams ripping open if there is a quilt top that they have not touched for a while, or it's transported, or all these other things. So to help with seams not popping, I just backstitch everything, start and stop, and it just helps keep things from falling apart, because oftentimes I start a project and then it's transported between my home, and if I'm working at my local quilt shop, I'll take it with me to do between customers, or maybe, you know, we're going to have people over, and right now I just sew on our dining room table, so we might need that space, so I might have to put it away and pull it out back out later, or it just sits there for a few months while I'm busy doing other things. So backstitching everything just makes sure that when I go back to my project, not half of it is starting to come apart. And here I am just using my thread cutter on the side of my machine to cut between the pieces we chain stitched together. And then I'm going to flip it over and sew on the other side of the pieces that we only did the one seam. But yeah, I find this method works really well. I like doing it. It comes out with really accurate half square triangles after you trim them, which is kind of a problem for me if I am doing it the more traditional way. So if you have a problem with half square triangles, I would suggest trying this, cutting your pieces a little bit bigger than what your ultimate piece size is going to be, because we're going to trim these down. After we cut them in half and iron them, we're going to trim them down to 4.5 inches square for the actual top. So now we're going to iron the seams we just sewed. It's called setting your seam. And yes, there's my cat. He really likes to sit on my ironing pad, but I had to move him over. This is called setting your seam, and this really helps them lay flat. This also happens to, you know, get rid of that heat erase pen that I used to mark the center line. Not that big of a deal, because that's actually we're going to be cutting, but more to set the seam and just make sure everything is laying flat. So now we're going to cut. I'm going to take my 1/4 inch mark on my ruler. It's kind of hard to see, but it's that pink line right on the edge, and just line it up with one of the seams I just sewed, and then cut between the seams. And this will provide, you know, more or less that 1/4 inch seam on each side of the seams we just sewed, giving you 2 half square triangle pieces with just 1 piece, which is kind of fun. Again, lining up that 1/4 inch mark on the seams you sewed, not necessarily on the diagonal, because sometimes they're not 100% the same. And again, I had to move my cat. But now we are going to, again, set that seam. So iron over it flat first. Here I went to iron it, but I realized I wanted the seam allowance to actually be under the dark blue fabric. Because when you push your seam allowance underneath a piece, it kind of shows through. And so you usually want to iron it to the dark side so it's a little bit more invisible. So that's just why I stopped and flipped it over. Again, setting seam, then ironing it out. This is just the way that I iron. There's not really a right or wrong way, as long as everything gets where it needs to be and it's nice and flat. I just find this way works for me. I got this iron as a gift from somebody in one of the classes I was teaching, a beginner's quilters class. And honestly, it's like my all-time favorite. I use it all the time. I think it's from like the 60s or 70s or something, but it doesn't have that stupid like off when you don't use it for a while, so it just stays nice and hot. It's kind of heavy, so it's nice because it actually like presses down on the fabric without me having to press too hard. It just works really well. I do forget to unplug it often though, so that kind of sucks. Okay, now we have ironed all the pieces open. So, like I said, we're going to trim these down to 4.5 inches square to be used in the quilt top. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to line up that diagonal seam that we just sewed with the diagonal markers on my squares for my ruler. Trying to trim off just a little bit of the edges on each side to give us a perfectly square corner to do our next measurement and cut. So then I'll turn it around and use the 4.5 inch marker on each straight side that we just cut. And doing it this way, like you'll see it lines up really well with that diagonal because that's what we started with as a reference. So you'll get a really nice square 4.5 inch half square triangle to put in your quilt top. And yeah, you do get a lot of little scraps. I am a scrap saver. I hate throwing things away, so I do save them all in like a Ziploc bag. I sometimes, if they're big enough, will use them in things like applique or foundation paper piecing. These little scraps like this, though, will just live in there until I decide to do something where it needs stuffing, like those Christmas trees that everybody was making this year. As little decorations. I thought those were so cute. These scraps are great for stuffing those because who cares what's in them as long as they look cute. And that's all for today. Come back for next time.